Before the actual class, a few announcements. First off is that tomorrow at 10, the Sangha members over here in Larongar, Lama Mentok will bestow some Dharma to the male practitioners. Only to the male practitioners over here. The female practitioners do not come here yet. It is only to the male practitioners. The male practitioners who make such whenever you're here receiving the initiation, you should not gather around and get too crowded. Some said that we should go to the older shrine hall, but I don't think that would be big enough. People are saying that if you're just using the excuses of that it's not easy to manage all the entrances, you're just making the excuse of being lazy. All the supervisors here usually should pay more attention to the details. If you don't pay attention, then all kinds of things could arise, all kinds of difficulties could happen. After staying here for so long, you should be aware of the situation and make predictions. Some of the temporary visitors, you will receive the permits of entering into that mandala later after class. That's the first thing, and the second thing is about the oral transmission. The female practitioners over here have already received the Vimaning tea, and in terms of the profound Ning tea, will begin tomorrow at 6:40 a.m. all the way till 6:30 p.m. If the oral transmission won't be finished on time, then we will have about half a day extra the day after. Again, it's only towards the practitioners in Larongar. So the latest, the oral transmissions will be fully bestowed. Will be fully bestowed day after tomorrow. So the day after tomorrow, in fact, it should be entering the way of a great vehicle. However, I will give the teaching on Uttaratantra Shastra instead, because we will complete this teaching. The answer past profound and wonderful Dharma is difficult to encounter in billions of aeons. I now see it here to receive it and uphold it. I vow to fathom the Tathagata's true meaning. Sangye kamdang sangye shangchibdang sangye chudang sangye mchanle te tagbasem chen jijang sam shaman dan jemba namji shoyer yam lorden jari yimte la lorden jari yimte lamu ba
상지 용던 초기 논지를 때 삼일 용던 초람 ngong가베 semsin 근집 소놈 zirgyom 강직 샹집 돈다 니르비 세리 노르비 프리바노 상지 장드름 냠바 니르 추르 남라 땅바르나 장강들의 측점 투상 투니 장의 문난도 짐발레 숑 게와텔레 소놈 체마 토브른겨 로든 강직 라미드 샹침도 베카라 담마양 링의 예티 바파메 버츠점점의 중실라 장강들의 측점 투상 투니 장의 문난도 측점 레숑 게와텔레 소놈 체마 토브른겨 강직도 나츠박섬지 뇽몽 메인저 상튼 하당 상님 탈숨 족법 상집 포메드 탑금라 장강텔레 측점 투상 투니장의 무나 투니장의 무난도 상튼 레종 게와텔레 소놈 체모 토브른겨 강실 준비 롱슈 떡는 접시장 첨짐 도립 군배 뇽몽 봉르시나 셔르 뇽모 시샤건 봉테이 셔르 domchok teni tei dian teni jon tuba yen gane dang ten kerwa dang tei yondon tomjup te gerwa yenam kemba yer rnamji chirkut jotba la lordun yotang niba ninit dang yondon damba mupe nam nirdo tevjin xshagba no kompang tobir kardan yer samme kebi yerne yotang mjeva tobni tang toban denji yondan dar danji tadmu tatpe mubu shir ndunupson chandang sangtan dang shirb lasu yondan shnoda shanchib semna te taglar tagdan nevra nebran yer shanchib sem putishin bidon putishin Stagda nevra nebran yer tena stagda nevne per gyar tripo shirmar dog sonum parur shirnzogtang shirnzogtang yonsa tagba netan yer sonum parur shimba ringa sonum parur shimba ringa telar nangsam stogme pe terzog yonsa tagba na teyi mamtan shokpang shir jinshong sonum jimba te tsacham levshong tsacham yin zot tang sang tang ni tang na gomshong zon na zonji kandan ro korsum number tagba kang ten shivshi jibarndo serna laso rna to kang ten nyom jibarndo da shivsha lerjan te tag na ponje jan me te shir shirim chogyen tevjin na tube tevshir tubam chog
Now let's study the Uttaratantra Shastra. Right now we are studying the 5th chapter. We're beginning the 5th chapter, which is the last chapter. This chapter talks about the benefit of the previous 4 Vajra points. This is then expounded in the 2 aspects. The first one is the incisive explanation of through praisings of its supreme quality, and the second one is through its differences. Then the explicit explanations. In our first chapter, we talked about the element, the Tadagagarba. And out of the 2 aspects of the element, it talks about the 2 aspects as well. The first one is the one with adventitious stains, which is then called Tadagagarba, and then also the quality that is completely free from adventitious thing, that is taught from the view of the purification, which is enlightenment. From the third chapter, we talked about the fruition of the complete fruition and the complete fruition and the pure fruition. Then we also studied the fourth chapter about the activities. So we studied the qualities and then the activities of the Buddha. So those 4 aspects have already been expounded in the previous the chapters. In fact, we've studied 7 Vajra points. However, in this chapter, it specifically talks about the 4 chapters, because in the first chapter, it talks about the 3 Vajra points of the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. Therefore, it doesn't need to be further expounded over here. So in the 5th chapter, we are simply studying the following 4 Vajra points. Over here, it talks about the bodhisattvas, all the way from the 1st to 10th bhumi. In fact, they cannot perceive the 4 Vajra points completely. The 4 Vajra points are still unfathomable for them. If the great bodhisattvas cannot do so, cannot fathom the profundity of such, then how could the ordinary beings and the Shravakas and Pradika Buddhas to perceive all of them? Who's the one that can completely fathom the 4 Vajra points? In fact, the 4 Vajra points are the field of experience of the Buddha. The Buddhas the Buddhas with the representation of Shakyamuni Buddha, in fact, they would uphold such kind of field of experience to fathom the profundity of the 4 Vajra points. However, to the believers, to the kind of disciples whom uphold great devotion, they would also be able to come to the insights of the 4 Vajra points as well. According to Mahaprajna Paramita Shastra, it says that the nature of the Buddha is of great profundity, is difficult to be perceived and difficult to enter. All the 4 Vajra points, the quality, the activity, the characteristics of the Buddha, in fact, are very difficult to be fathomed and to enter. The Shravakas and Pradika Buddhas are not able to fathom it at all, as the 4 Vajra points are only the field of experience of the Buddhas. But does that mean that if for the ordinary beings like us, who are currently at the stage of cause and still accumulating merits and so on, are completely impossible to fathom such profundity? It is not like that either. It is rather you, as a believer, you can rely on your devotion and understand it and generate insight. Therefore, as beginner, as a disciples, we should pay attention to the teachings, and then we will be able to gather a sense of understanding to it still. And the second outline talks about how it surpassed that of the other skillful means, and out of which it talks about the concise explanation and the extensive explanation. In brief, we can understand that such kind of understanding of the four Vajra points surpass that of the other meritorious activities. Over here it says that the bodhisattvas endowed with insights and wisdom, they would generate a great faith towards the the field of experience of the Buddha as well as the wisdom of the Buddha. So they would generate the special devotion towards the 4 points. And for these kinds of practitioners, they can be called the worthy vessels of the Buddhas, the worthy vessels of the Buddhas that endowed with the 10 powers and so on. So as a practitioner, if you were to generate faith and great devotion without any doubt towards what's taught in the chapter 3 and chapter 4 about the quality and about the activities, then this particular disciple can be called as the proper vessel to receive all kinds of merits bestowed by the Buddha, and their Mahayana disposition will be awakened soon. Previously, we've already studied how the Buddha is endowed with all the unfathomable qualities. In the translation over here, it says that the merits that's accumulated from taking delight, especially taking devotion to the 4 Vajra points. All of those merits can overpower that of the sentient beings practicing all kinds of accumulation of merit, such as generosity and so on. There are lots of practitioners whom engage in generosity and all kinds of ways of accumulating the merit. However, such kind of merit generated from taking faith and delight in the 4 Vajra points would surpass that of the other disciples. So upon contemplating the 4 Vajra point, after studying the 4 Vajra point and having faith in the 4 Vajra point, in fact, such merit is enormous. How is it enormous? These are the 3. Over here, there are the 3 verses, very well-known verses and quite famous and popular verses that is stated over here. Talks about how such kind of merit would surpass that of generosity, and the second one is surpass that of upholding precept, and the third one is meditative absorption. So let's look at the first one. The first one says, someone striking for enlightenment may turn to the Dharma kings, offering golden fields adorned with gems of equal number of atoms in the Buddha fields, and may continue doing so every day. Another may just hear a word of this, and upon hearing it, become filled with devotion. He will attain merits far greater and more manifold than the virtue sprung from this practice of giving. So, if a person were to make the offering of gold and gem and making offering to the various Dharma kings and to the Pure Lands that's filled with gold and gems of equal number of the atoms of the Buddha fields, which is innumerable and infinite.
可能获得这个数量也好，或者说是这个
equaling to the number of the Buddha, or equaling to the number of the Buddha field, or equaling of the number of the offering. It is not too obvious in this in the particular text. However, we understand it is to the infinite numbers. If you were to make offering like such, then the merit would ever grow. However, such kind of ever-growing merit compared to the kind of practitioners upholding devotion and then delve into such teachings with the profound 4 Vajra points, even if they don't understand, they would still uphold the great merits, as it is said that the merit of making offering to the Buddha, in fact, such kind of merit is infinite, especially if you were to make offerings to the Buddhas or the valid object of receiving the offering on the auspicious days, such as the 8th or the 15th of the lunar calendar. Such kind of merit would be ever-growing and would be enormous. However, the beings with wisdom, endowed with insights, if they were to even contemplate the 4 Vajra points, even if they don't understand, even if they were to just hear one particular sentence and one stanza, and then after hearing it, they would not generate wrong view. They would not uphold it with the wrong insights. However, they would generate a sense of faith with great sincerity. Then that kind of merit would be far surpass that of making offerings. I think hearing just one stanza is not that difficult. After class, we usually have after-class presentation where in different groups, the Sangha members would talk about the different verses to each other and then start expounding the meaning of the verses to each other. Such kind of merit is unfathomable. Of course, for those of you who don't believe the Dharma teaching, we're not addressing this particular teaching to those people because it won't generate any faith anyways. However, since you're a Buddhist, and since you're listening to this teaching, since you're sitting here, then upon hearing this particular Vajra statement proclaimed by Maitreya, then you should generate great faith that even just by repeating it or hearing it, it could generate greater merit than making offerings to innumerable Buddha fields and to innumerable Buddhas. The teachings of Uttaratantra Shastra, the teachings on Buddha nature, is very difficult to hear. So all of us now have the opportunity of listening to it, is considered as the ones endowed with great merits. The second aspect is that an intelligent person wishing for enlightenment. So this intelligent person doesn't seek for the fruition of Pravaka, which is arhathood, or of that Pratika Buddha, or being born in a better place, or so on. If a true intelligent person were to generate the kind of wish to attain enlightenment, and then guarding flawless moral conduct and do so effortlessly even through many eons, such kind of merit is inconceivable. Even if you were to uphold or observe the precept for a short period of time, it would generate great merit. It is stated that the ones whom uphold or observe precepts, such kind of person uphold great merits that could surpass the end of eon. So we can see that a person who can hold such pure conduct for many aeons and with the enlightenment as their aspiration, this kind of person is quite great. Don't even mention about a person whom can uphold such pure precept for many aeons. If you can uphold pure precepts, even for example, a later part of your life or a period of your life, then that kind of merit is inconceivable still. However, another may just hear a word of this teaching on the four Vajra points, and upon hearing it, becomes filled with devotion, and he will attain merits far greater than manifold than the virtue sprung from this discipline. Therefore, we can see that upholding precepts, the pure precept, is important. However, for those of you who listen to this Uttaratantra Shastra, the merit of hearing this teaching far surpass that of the ones whom accumulated pure precepts for many aeons. Therefore, at the beginning of my path, at the beginning of giving the teaching back in 2019, around May or June, I really hoped that people could receive the teachings. At that time, there were about 60,000 people listening to the Uttaratantra Shastra at the very beginning. But now, of course, since the disembowelment of the Dharma groups and so on, we don't really have that many people listening to these teachings with the live teaching. However, I understand that many of you are still listening to this teaching through recording, through reading the transcripts and so on. I understand many of you are still trying your best in receiving this teaching. Back then, when I first started giving the teaching of Uttaratantra Shastra in the first class, I felt deeply in my heart that if all of those people whom can receive the teaching for the first class can last till the last class, wouldn't that be wonderful? It is quite necessary. And back then, I felt very inspired to do so, though this class hasn't really lasted for many lessons. In fact, there are about less than 50 classes, but lots of the favorable conditions unfortunately ceased. Therefore, the teachings didn't reach to that large number of people on real time. However, I think those of you who have persevered all the way till the end of the class, it is really wonderful. Tomorrow we will complete this teaching. Initially, I thought maybe I will just give the last class next week. However, I thought it might be better for me to complete the teaching tomorrow so that no obstacles would arise within that period of time. And then the next talks about meditative stability. The kind of people whom may finally achieve the divine meditative stability and the Brahma's abode, thus quenching all afflictions fire. Their meditative absorption may attain, for example, the 4 dhyanas and the 4 immeasurables. If one were to continuously to practice in such a way, at the very end of it, they would be able to attain the great fruition of Bodhi if they were to persevere all the way through upon practicing all of those meditative absorption. Just as when we studied Abhidharma, we learned that the practitioners all the way from the beginning of the study, the beginning of the practice, and then all the way till the last stage of attaining fruition with the aspiration of liberating all sentient beings with such kind of bodhicitta in their heart. Such kind of merit would be vast. However, such kind of vast merit, compared to the merit of studying Uttaratantra Shastra, such kind of merit is still inferior, because whenever we study the 4 Vajra points, that is of great profundity, listening to such profound teachings, if one do not understand the meaning of it, or even only hearing one particular verse, and after hearing it, there is no wrong views that's generated to the teachings. For example, there are people after hearing the teaching would start saying that it is definitely not true. It is the Buddha doesn't have such qualities. The Buddha doesn't have the characteristics. It must not be true. The Buddha doesn't have such activities, and so on. If a person were to generate such kind of wrong views, of course, that doesn't really fit into this category. However, for those people who never generated even any wrong views or any doubts, but take the true devotion to uphold the teachings of the 4 Vajra points, and then this kind of person would generate a great merit. As ordinary beings, we would have the influctuation of emotions, and it is understandable. For the first and second times, it is it is forgivable to the other ordinary beings, but the Buddha, in fact, would not take those into the Buddha's heart. The Buddha would not particularly get annoyed by others' emotional fluctuations. So the kind of merit of listening to the teachings of the 4 Vajra points would surpass that of the merit accumulated through practicing meditative absorption. These 3 verses are the ones that I usually quote. When I was translating this text, I felt very much inspired by the 3 verses. When I was listening to the teachings taught by Phuntsok Rinpoche back in 1985, I also was very much inspired by the 3 verses. Some of the pith verses and instructions given back then I could remember, but lots of the content I still feel quite blur about them. But these 3 verses have really made an impression in my mind. After studying Uttaratantra Shastra, for those of you who have not received the complete oral transmission, you can request the oral transmission from the ones who have received the full oral transmission. It is not difficult for those of you who receive the full oral transmission to the ones who have not, because the verses are rather quite short. And then the next part we're going to talk about how supreme the merit is and why it is. When we look at observing precepts, when we talk about meditative absorption and attaining such kind of meditative absorption, as well as practicing pure generosity, those are difficult. But why would you say that listening to the teachings of the four Vajra points, which could be considered rather easy. All you need to do is just listen to the teachings. How could you say that the later would surpass that of the former? Then it's too easy. I can just listen to the verses and then fall asleep. I don't need to do anything else. Generosity is difficult as well because it's could generate lots of suffering if you have the materials to offer to the others, but you don't know how to. And sometimes is that you don't have the material offerings to give to the others. And sometimes it's a question of how to give to the others in a reasonable way. That could also be problematic. So the generosity could bring lots of the associated problems. In Abhidharma, it says that in order to be reborn in the higher realm or in the virtuous realm, then it would be the best the way of attaining such higher birth is to observing precepts. By upholding precepts, pure precepts, then in the future you will be able to enjoy all kinds of perfect fruition. There are people after there are people without merit. They would get very tense when it comes to seeking any worldly return, such as finding a job or establish oneself within a society. And there are people with merit, however, everything seems rather quite spontaneous and effortless. And the reason of generating such kind of merit is through observing precepts. So we can see that by bestowing generosity, it could come to the kind of fruition of enjoying all kinds of enjoyments, and by observing precepts could temporarily fulfill one's wish to be reborn in higher realm and to obtain a beautiful physical appearance. And then the practice of dhyana could eradicate all the afflictions of the three realms. However, the ultimate way of parting from all the adventitious stings in the three realms and purify the adventitious stains on the element, and to obtain the qualities as well as the qualities and activities, then with such kind of wisdom of understanding the four Vajra points would be able to eliminate all the obscurations of emotions and of the accumulated karmas. So over here the karma then refers to the alaya that we all have and all the seeds that's been implanted within it. However, after studying the Uttaratantra Shastra, after studying the seeds of the Buddha, the element that we all obtain, then such kind of understanding would surpass all the previous accumulations. Studying this, I think you would be able to generate a deeper sense of understanding of it, and that explains why Tibetan Buddhism upholds the system of studying contemplation and practice. Because studying this particular teaching only through yourself, or studying the Dharma through yourself, you won't be able to generate the understanding and the wisdom However, if you were to receive the teachings from a teacher and then study systematically, then you would be able to understand the framework of enlightenment. That is why I mentioned that the teachings that's provided in the Buddhist institute like ours, we should first of all study the third turning of the Dharma wheel, which is understand the Buddha nature, and then we would, as a practitioner, as a Buddhist practitioner, we should be able to generate the understanding of why there is Buddha nature and how there is Buddha nature, and then how to obtain such reveal of the Buddha nature through the purification of the adventitious things. And after understanding it, you would be able to tread on the path of practice. So over here it says that after studying the Uttaratantra Shastra, then after understanding the Buddha nature, then such kind of wisdom could surpass that of the previous three. According to value cognition, it is the explanation of the value cognition. It says that there are the threefold logic, where it comes to the threefold logic, where it comes to the conclusion that eradicating the root of samsara is based on the wisdom, because such kind of wisdom can be only obtained through the understanding and delve into the profundity of the Bodhi, but it cannot be generated through, or cannot be revealed through the generosity or observing precepts or practicing on dhyana. And then let's look at the benefits. The first one is the ultimate benefits. After studying Uttaratantra Shastra, we would be able to make the auspicious connections to the Buddhas. And then the next one is the benefit of entering the path. So let's look at the first one, which is the ultimate benefit. In the first chapter, we've already talked about the all-pervading quality of the element. So over here it talks about how all the sentient beings, since they have the Buddha nature, everyone has such element of Buddha nature. Therefore, in fact, such teaching was given in the first chapter, and the second chapter talks about how such adventitious transformation, how the complete transformation of devoid of any adventitious thing could lead to great Bodhi. And then the third chapter we've studied, and then in the next chapter we've studied the different kinds of qualities, the third chapter. The fourth chapter talks about the activities that could be carried out relying on the qualities of the Buddha. So those are the content of the four chapters, which are summarized over here. And then over here it says that as long as a person were to generate sincere devotion, through our previous analysis, we've already understood the teaching of how every sentient being uphold the Buddha nature. And then if a person were to generate a sincere devotion, the kind of devotion that would not retrogress, The bodhisattva endowed with wisdom would generate such understanding that all sentient beings, without exception, have this Buddha nature. And then the second faith is based on after the purification of adventitious things, one would be able to attain the great fruition of enlightenment. So this is the faith of longing. And then the third faith refers to the ultimate two benefits and the merit that is associated with such attainment is the pure faith, the pure devotion. For such kind of bodhisattva, after obtaining the three types of faith or devotion, in fact, they have obtained the great conditions and made the great connections to the pure activities of the Bodhi. And they would be able to tread on the path with great diligence. Through this part of the teaching, I think we will generate the great longing to generate the faith, because faith is so crucial in the spiritual path. Without faith, you won't be able to tread onto the path and attain the fruition. Just as it is stated in the Avatamsaka Sutra, it says that the faith is the seed that would not be destroyed to generate the merit. Faith would be able to cultivate the tree of the Bodhi, and faith would be able to increase the supreme wisdom. Faith can display the merits of the body, speech, and mind of the Buddha. In our process of studying and practicing on the path of the Dharma, sometimes wisdom is more important, sometimes devotion is more important, sometimes compassion is more important. So those are the three key aspects: wisdom, compassion, and faith. Those three keys are the most crucial on the path. Without the three keys, you won't be able to enter into the path of Mahayana. Without faith, you will not be able to continuously to practice with great diligence. And without faith, you won't be able to tread forward without retrogression. I notice lots of our fellow practitioners, you are very smart, but if you don't have faith, then it would be very difficult for you to complete your path. I notice many of you indeed uphold the sincere devotion and the devotion of longing to attain the Bodhi, and the devotion of purity to benefit to fulfill the two benefits. I notice that there are practitioners like such. And now in terms of the benefit of entering the path, there are two aspects. The first one is talking about the benefit of making the aspiration of the Supreme Bodhi. The verse over here says that those who realize this is an inconceivable object is present, and someone like me can attain it. Its attainment will hold such qualities, and endowment will aspire to it, filled with faith, and thus becoming vessels of all qualities, such as longing, diligence, mindfulness, meditative stability, wisdom, and so on. Bodhicitta will be ever present in them. Previously, we've already talked about how the four Vajra points are unfathomable. Therefore, over here it says that this inconceivable object, that is the 4 Vajra points, is present and someone like me can attain it. This is the second aspect. This is taught in the second chapter, talking about that I have this intrinsic resource that is the element. If we don't have such element of Tathagata Garbha, then there's no way for us to study any other foreign languages. As a Tibetan, if I were to study any other foreign languages, as a Tibetan, but without element of Tathagata Garbha, then I won't be able to understand it at all. However, since we have the element, then we will definitely be able to be fluent in other languages or any other traits and knowledges, because the element is omniscient. Therefore, it is possible. It is only that we have not discovered it or purified the adventitious stains on it yet. In the second chapter, it talks about how such element can be, how the adventitious of the element can be removed, and then all sentient beings have the potential to attain the ultimate fruition. And then it talks about over here that through the three types of faith, one would be able to generate all the supreme faith and understanding. And for such reason, one would be able to become the vessel of seeking for the Dharma with great longing and taking delight in treading on the path and practice with great diligence. Also, the kind of right mindfulness where one would remember the teachings at all times and wholeheartedly practice up on the meditative absorption. Also, to cultivate the kind of wisdom, so one would be able to become the proper vessel of upholding the 5 types of qualities that's stated over here. A few changes in my translation, in the Chinese translation over here, especially the punctuations that's used. So over here it talks about if one studies Uttaratantra Shastra really well, then that kind of person it would be easier for that kind of person to generate a bodhicitta. And after studying this, we understand that the faith towards the 4 Vajra points are indeed extremely important. Again, according to Avatamsaka Sutra, it says that taking profound faith in the Buddha and the Dharma, as well as taking faith in the path of the Sangha, taking great faith to that of the supreme great Bodhi. So that kind of person can be considered as the beginner bodhisattva, or the bodhisattva who first generated faith or generated aspiration. Sometimes when we look around, we notice that whenever we're happy, we feel a deeper sense or a stronger sense of devotion and faith. But whenever there are the adversities, then our devotion would wane. Therefore, it is important for us to maintain a sense of faith and devotion by practicing sacred outlook. The next outline over here says that the benefits of practicing the 6 paramitas, which has 4 aspects. The first one talks about the reason of attainment of complete perfection. Such kind of bodhicitta is ever constant within the mind of the disciple of the Buddha. And then the practitioner will not retrogress from the bodhi. The various paramitas that could be accumulated from the different paramitas are of great purity and completion. This is the first half of the verse, and second half is a further explanation of the former. We can see that Maitreya's way of composing a text is expand from the former statement into more detailed explanation. So over here, the second half of the verse says that the 5 paramitas that could accumulate the merit, In fact, such kind of practice of the prajna paramitas, is practiced with the threefold emptiness. Once such kind of threefold of emptiness is pure and can be completed in this way, in various explanations and commentaries, the completion and purity are taught in different ways. And in Tarawa's commentary, in fact, he did not separate the two. The completion talks about threefold emptiness, and purity talks about eradication of obscuration, according to other commentaries. So what are the threefold emptiness? The threefold emptiness talks about the actor, the action, and the object of receiving such action. For example, the ones who suffer from poverty receiving the generosity from the one who's bestowing them certain things. So the action of giving and the actor of the philanthropy and the one who's receiving such generosity, such as the poor, all of them are pure, are complete. And if you were to use such kind of threefold emptiness, those paramitas would also be pure and complete, as such kind of purity have already eradicated all the obscurations of stinginess and so on when it comes to connection to the particular paramita, such as generosity. Now the second aspect is talking about the definition of the accumulations. In the particular explanation, it talks about the 6 perfections, 6 paramitas, but the wisdom paramita shouldn't be counted in this. But anyhow, it talks about the 6 paramitas. So the 6 paramitas that is the 6 paramitas is also included in the 3 aspects of merit, and in the generosity aspect, it is called the generosity paramita, and in the aspect of observing precept, it is the pure perception paramita, and then patience paramita and samadhi or meditation paramita can be included in the practice, in the merit that is generated or arose from the practice. On top of that, the diligence and the pervasive actions can be included in the three aspects of accumulating merit as well, and especially taking delight in diligence. People nowadays, they don't really take delight in Dharma activities. For example, whenever they engage in the worldly matters, they're very diligent, they are tireless. However, when it comes to the Dharma activities, they would start to get very lazy and drowsy whenever there's a Dharma activity. Diligence, I think, is quite important. I'm not quite sure why it says 6 paramitas, because there are 5. But this is translated according to that commentary, therefore I'm just therefore I included it as 6 paramitas anyways. So a few more verses. Now the third one talks about recognizing the 2 obscurations, or eliminating the 2 veils. Whatever ideation in terms of the 3 cycles or 3 folds is viewed as the veil of the hindrances to knowledge. In the other sutras and shastras, I think we've also talked about it or quoted from this verse. What is the obscuration of knowing? Such kind of obscuration. Such kind of obscuration is the obscuration of enlightenment, and there are the different obscurations that would be connected to the various paramitas, such as the ones whom practice generosity paramita. Then there's the obscuration of stinginess, and there are the obscuration of there are the various obscurations that is connected to the paramitas, and all of those that would obscure one to the fulfillment of the pure practice of the threefold emptiness of the paramita practices. Those are considered as the obscuration of knowledge. And then what is obscuration of afflictions? The obscuration of afflictions then refers to, for example, the obscuration of generosity is stinginess, and the obscuration of precepts is to not observe the precepts, and the obscuration of patience is anger, and then to diligence is laziness. So those obscuration of afflictions are rather the coarse appearances of them, or the coarse obscurations. What's a good term to describe the obscuration of affliction to observing precept? Breaking the precepts? Harm? No, not harm. Harm is associated with aggression. So the obscuration of knowing is associated with the threefold emptiness. So whenever you grasp onto anything as solid, then that is the obscuration of knowing. And then later, all the coarse obscurations is associated with the obscuration of afflictions, which is the complete reverse of the paramita. Whatever they are, let it be generosity and upholding precepts and diligence, whatever they are. In fact, other than wisdom, in fact, none of those could eradicate the two obscurations. Simply through generosity or any of the other 5 paramitas, none of those can eradicate the two obscurations. According to Prajnaparamita Shastra, it says that even if the group of blinds were led by the leader who is also blind, they would not be able to reach to the destination. And then according to the 400 verses where it says that if we do not practice the other meritorious paramitas, rather if we were to practice on emptiness, then we will attain the supreme nirvana. This is why wisdom is the most superior out of all. And such wisdom doesn't arise from nowhere. There is a basis. What's the basis? The basis is to study the 4 Vajra points, and any sutra or shastras that's taught affiliated with the 4 Vajra points. To completely uproot the two obscurations, we need to rely on this wisdom as well. It is quite rare for someone who can study on their own and then attain Buddhahood. Very, very rare. Especially when it comes to Buddhism. If you were to just study on your own and then waiting naturally and spontaneously to attain Buddhahood, it's very difficult. So we have to understand that the basis of generating such wisdom is through listening of the Dharma, and the listening of the Dharma, studying of the Dharma is much more important than anything else. And such kind of merit of listening to the Dharma would surpass that of generosity and of diligence and so on. Listening to the Dharma. According to the sutra, it says that the merits of listening to the Dharma teachings would generate great merit, would eradicate all the vicious deeds, and would encourage one to practice virtuous deeds. After listening to the Dharma teachings, the body, speech, and mind would rather be very suitable to the Dharma, would be very appropriate. We can see a person if they've listened to the Dharma, studied the Dharma or not, just simply through their body, speech, and mind, just simply by looking at them. Of course, practice is something different, but if a person were to listen extensively, they would be able to differentiate what are the kind of things that need to be eradicated and what are the things that need to be practiced. Therefore, whenever you have the opportunity, I really hope that you should try your best to listen to the correct Dharma and then write them down and then observe your mind in according to the correct Dharma teachings. So slowly and slowly, your mind stream would be tamed, just like how the great masters had done in the past. Because at the beginning of their path, they also started off with a rather very stubborn mind, and slowly they were able to tame their mind to be more malleable and to practice in accordance with the Dharma, to be more appropriate in various ways, and then eventually they will be able to contribute to the Dharma propagations. So if we were to start with listening to the Dharma more extensively and then practice on it and then tread on the path and generate faith and so on and so forth, you will definitely be able to reach there as well. If you were to be infused in the large pot of Mahayana, you will be tinted with the color of Mahayana, and wherever you go, you will be able to influence the others. You have already you are already tinted with the Mahayana color of the red, and whenever and wherever you go, you will be able to influence the others and tint everywhere as the red Mahayana color to everyone and everywhere. There are people, for example, who are not very good at conducting virtuous deeds, rather the vice deeds, and they would make influence. Similarly, if we were to practice virtue and influence the others in such a way, we would be able to propagate virtue. But first, we need to listen to the Dharma teaching and then generate wisdom, and then we will be able to benefit sentient beings selflessly. So we'll stop here today. Tomorrow, we will have our last and completion class on the Uttaratantra Shastra. So please make sure you attend this class on time. Chubum